Hi everyone, Gloomthany Doom Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it is time for a review of the new Richard Dawson album 2020. This is the latest full-length LP from English singer and songwriter Richard Dawson, who in my opinion has been one of indie folk's best-kept secrets for the past decade or so. Over the years, Dawson has amassed a strange but versatile discography, which piqued my interest with the release of his album Peasant a few years ago, a project that featured basically an hour of these neo-medieval folk songs with bold but blemished acoustic guitars, basically archaic noise folk, and through some very animated vocal performances, Dawson would tell these stories inspired by the days of yore, mentioning cauldrons and kingdoms and soldiers, while also singing about the dark and savage side of this era too, the abject poverty, selling children for grain. Richard's latest project here is a change of pace though. Of course, the antiquated but updated English folkisms that have inspired much of Dawson's discography also carry over onto 2020. But there's a lot more electric instrumentation here. There are some weird synths and vocal effects occasionally, drums too. This album is very much a product of our modern era, not just in its sound, but in its lyrics too. I mean, the title of this thing is 2020. It's very obviously looking forward to the very near future, with one song after another reading like a slightly dystopian take on our late-stage capitalist present. There are tracks on this thing referencing our current-day problems with modern technology, our environment, the political landscape, also workers toiling away in an Amazon fulfillment center. And even though this project is different thematically and sonically from Richard Dawson's previous Peasant, there are some interesting ways in which these records parallel in their runtime, in the melody writing. Both albums actually feature a song titled No One, a short little interlude track on the second to last song of the record. And even though both these albums are from different time periods narratively, they both feature stories with protagonists that are essentially caught in or struggling against the prevailing problems of the society they were born into. So in a way, it's safe to say that Peasant and 2020 are sister albums, or connected, or one is the sequel to the other. And in my opinion, 2020 is every bit as ingenious and creative as its predecessor, though maybe Dawson's lyrics on this one are a bit more cutting because he's a product of the era that he's critiquing. And while I really do love the ideas that Dawson is putting forward on this album, the instrumentals, in my opinion, are just as intriguing. The explosive track Civil Servant is an amazing kickoff to this project, at the very start with these grunting, grinding, off-kilter riffs. That mechanical repetition, I feel like I'm being ground into the gears of a failing society, or chased down by a madman with a knife. After this, we quickly transition into these tense narrative verses. The day for our protagonist begins very mundane, getting up, morning, pouring some cereal, and being subjected to another day at a job that you despise. We get an epic triumphant chorus on this one with some odd falsetto vocals. Some of the medieval elements of Peasant really come back during moments like this. Our protagonist goes into these inner thoughts later into the track about wanting to beat a coworker's head in, basically to a bloody pulp, wanting to call in sick, and struggling with processing the traumas of the people that this person has to deal with. Which all sounds a little self-centered, yes, but Dawson's characterization of people in these civil servant positions isn't too much different than what is often reported by people who are social workers in the US. Working crazy hours, dealing with a lack of resources, being worked to the point where you're jaded and you don't care about your job anymore. Just take it as the avant noise folk UK version of Take This Job and Shove It. Dawson reels it back in a little bit with the much less noisy The Queen's Head, which is a sobering tale about an English town flooded, which when researching I saw is not too uncommon of an occurrence in the UK, with notable and recent floods happening in 07, 08, 09, 12, and 15. I love the plucky, weird, folky instrumentation on this track, the grand rush of synths and vocals on the hook. But most interesting on this track are the vivid descriptions of people dealing with this ordeal, whether it be the vape shop guy ferrying his chocolate labs on a leaky kayak, or a local butcher handing out food while loudly proclaiming the lack of flood defenses is because of foreigners coming over and making use of public services. And of course we have the genius mantra on this track of how little we are, basically depicting humanity as being helpless in the face of the wrath of nature, which they are stirring through the destruction of the environment. Then Dawson dishes out two of the catchiest songs on the entire record with Two Halves and Jogging. The come on refrains on the former are just too good. I also love the galloping groove on the latter too. And while it seems like Dawson is singing from the standpoint of other people on this record much of the time, his descriptions of dealing with anxiety on this particular cut just seem too detailed to not come from a personal place. Next, we have the track Heart Emoji, which sees the skipping muted guitar lines repeating along with these sporadic synth embellishments that are very gentle. Essentially, it's a song about finding out that your partner is cheating by seeing some texts on their phone. The whole thing comes to a bloody end that I won't totally spoil, but I think that Dawson's character comes to the conclusion that some infidelity is going on pretty fast. And maybe the ending would have been more interesting, a little less absurd, if the protagonist had realized he had come to a false assumption or something. The song Black Triangle has one of the loudest and weirdest intros of any track on here. It feels like a warped take on some classic arena rock song, with grimy guitars and these fast little synth chords. It's like listening to the Who's Who Are You, but nightmare version. The whole thing quickly transitions into these fast, angular post-punk guitars and drums. Black MIDI fans take notice. So you have this long, winding, multi-phase song structure, these hard grooving verses, and all this is attached to a story about a guy who had a run-in with a UFO. Then he becomes obsessed with UFOs to the point where he has a website and a YouTube channel where he tracks sightings. His obsession seems to be destroying his marriage too. It's a hilarious and enthralling song about getting caught up in a very weird thing, but there you have it. Also, the zany vocal harmonies during the last climax of the song are fantastic. It's like I'm listening to a sci-fi folk punk epic. Then we have Fulfillment Center, which is a 10-minute long track and maybe has way more forethought put into it than any song about working in a fulfillment center should. But I think Dawson does a great job of depicting the daily hell that people who are caught in these types of jobs have to face. The repetition, all of the products having to be shipped at such a fast pace, people falling asleep on the job, or disgruntled workers being escorted off the premises. Also, having your movements and your work be timed and peeing into a bottle because you can't go to the bathroom. Dawson also depicts this work as being an endless cycle, with his protagonist saying that there is nothing left of them by the time they go home before they have to just go to sleep and wake up again to just start all over. Fresher's Ball is a decent low-key moment in the track list here. It's a so-so song about feeling lonely and missing someone, while also finding solace in some little things, in some silver linings of these clouds. And the closer, Dead Dog in an Alleyway, is a really climactic end of this record. The grim imagery of the dead dog and having trouble finding a place to sleep and rest, juxtaposed against the cold and callous, never-ending movements of the city, which Dawson depicts as a labyrinth of neon, which is one of many moments of poetic genius across this project. I'm really loving this one. I'm loving the shit out of this one. What a challenging, smart, witty, fun, and unsettling contribution to the folk catalog. I'm also loving the personal and story-centric songwriting throughout many of these tracks too, which in a way reminds me a little bit of Mark Kozelek's Sun Kil Moon, but obviously a lot of the storytelling here is much more dystopian and the instrumentals are coming from a totally different planet. Then there's also the case of Dawson's singing, which is just so expressive. I think that Dawson's voice to many newcomers might sound a little homely, but it certainly fits very snugly in these very sour and oddly catchy instrumentals. If you're looking for a more pleasant and breezy indie folk experience, you might want to avoid this one, maybe. But personally, I'm loving how unique and daring this project is. I think that maybe it would be great if all of the themes and the stories tied together in some way conceptually by the end of the whole thing. They don't. It's really just a collection of tracks, but there's a great amount of focus amongst all of those songs and a hell of a lot of great playing, creative writing, very memorable lyrics and stories, and even though this thing is so dense, it is so replayable, at least for me anyway. I'm feeling a light to decent 9 on this one. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Richard Dawson, forever.